You may not realize it, but prisons in the United States are a big business as many states turn over the cell keys to private industry. More than 130,000 inmates are being held in privately run prisons. That's a 44% increase since 2000. Two major companies in the business made $3.3 billion with a B dollars in 2011. Paul Ashton is from the Justice Policy Institute, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. Paul, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me on, Debbie.
As I read in on this issue, I was absolutely astounded. First of all, I did not realize that the growing industry of this private prison business and the amount of money. And I think what disturbs me so much is the success of these private industries hinges on getting more people incarcerated and keeping them incarcerated.
Yeah, it's really an unfortunate business. And, from the perspective of the Justice Policy Institute where I work, we really don't believe that private industry should have a hand in the justice system because, as you said, the only way that these companies get to make more money is to have either more people in their facilities or to have them stay there longer.
And we're talking about a lot of money. In the introduction, we said $3.3 billion. Let's talk about some of the tactics that these private industry companies use to make money, starting with the increase or the really large amount of money they charge for inmates, for instance, to make phone calls. Sort of go down the list of their tactics for making a profit.
Sure. So some of the things that we talked about in the 2011 report that the Justice Policy Institute released called Gaming the System was really talking about the political strategies that they use in addition to the tactics for cost-saving measures. So what you're talking about in terms of the phone calls, those are some of the cost-saving measures that private prison companies use. They also tend not to pay their prison corrections guards as much as public facilities. They don't allow unionization. They don't offer the same level of services as public facilities tend to do in terms of education or mental health services and that sort of thing. So those are some of the internal cost-saving measures that private prison companies use. But Gaming the System really talks about the political strategies, right? Because the only way that these companies get to make money is by having contracts with state governments or the federal government. And so the way that we kind of chronicled the way that they do that in Gaming the System was talking about what we termed the triangle of private prison political influence. And so basically these companies use, giving directly to political campaigns, lobbying, and then building relationships and associations as kind of their means to ensure that they have a market share.
And they really are garnering power because they've been very, very successful. Tell us about what you found in your report called Kids for Cash.
So the Kids for Cash scandal was a scandal that happened in Lucerne County, Pennsylvania, and that happened, we talked about in our report in 2011, and really the case happened between 2003 and 2008, and what you saw was two local judges were really getting kickbacks, around $2.6 million in kickbacks from a smaller private juvenile prison where they were sending youth to. Most of youth who didn't need to go to that facility in the first place. And so, between 2003 and 2008, these two judges saw roughly over 5,000, youth before them.
Indeed, Paul. Also, there is an ethnic and racial component here. I read and did in some of the reading. Talk a little bit about that, about the fact that these successful, quote unquote, successful businesses disproportionately affect, in an adverse way, African Americans and immigrants.
They do, and largely the criminal justice system in and of itself disproportionately impacts people of color. And so what you see is that transposed into the private prison industry as well. There's higher rates of incarceration for African Americans and Latinos. And one of the things we have been seeing lately in particular is the rise in Latino population both in the federal system and in private prisons as a result of kind of this immigration debate and the shift in the market for private prison companies. They're now moving into immigrant detention and immigrant detention facilities because that's where the money is.
In the final few seconds, talk a little bit more global. How much of a trend is this nationwide? I just saw there was a story in Philadelphia. A commission has voted to close 23 schools, but yet approved a $400 million state prison in Philadelphia. Tell me about the trend nationally.
I mean, what we're seeing nationally is we're seeing that governments and politicians are more willing to invest in the criminal justice system than in other services like education. And from the perspective of the Justice Policy Institute, we really talk about the need for investments in the front end of the system. So in education, employment, mental health, and substance abuse treatment. You know, those things we know help to decrease future justice system involvement, and those are the places we should be spending monetary resources and not in increasing the number of people who are in our prisons, not increasing laws that send people to prison, and not building new facilities when we're closing schools.
Briefly, what's your recommendation for a fix? You opened up by saying this was big business and money talks. Money does talk. So how do you change this trend and reverse this course?
You know, that's not an easy answer, because it's really up to our political leaders to make the decision not to have big business involved in our justice system. You know, they're spending millions of dollars lobbying our, state legislatures and the federal government. And so we really need to educate and be conscious of that fact, and really, work to push back on our legislatures and say we don't want private business involved in the correction system, because it's bad for America, it's bad for people, and it's bad for communities.
Paul Ashton, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.